are here today to discuss the future of Bangalore, particularly the ease of living in 2040. So the big question before us is, are we ready to embrace 2040 in terms of infrastructure, garbage recycling, better healthcare, better roads, mobility, climate change, and what have you? Are we ready? What do you think? Yes or no? Hopefully. Okay, I came to Bangalore more than 20 years ago. And right from then, all of us have been hearing certain promises. One of them which we hear consistently year after year is, Bangalore will be pothole-free in 100 days. Every year you hear this promise. One chief minister said, we will make a Singapore out of Bangalore. And what I've noticed over the years, incidentally, I started my career in Bangalore as a cub reporter covering the corporation. It was then Bangalore BMP, or I think Bangalore City Corporation. So every year we hear the same promises. And what I've noticed is we do not fix the problems of the future. We are busy fixing the problems of the past. We fix the problems of yesterday, not even problems of today. We had a beautiful international airport that came up. I landed there on the day of the inauguration, and we didn't even have great connectivity to the airport. Even to this day, we don't have a metro rail to the airport. There are so many such projects which have outrun their utility even before a decade. You take the Kyapuram flyover or the world famous flyover in South Bangalore. What's it? The Silk Boat flyover. Of course, it's easy for us to sit here in these kind of discussions and pontificate, complain, and be cynical. But the man in the hot seat, Mr. Gaurav Gupta, knows the limitations that the corporation faces, the limitations that the government faces. So we will divide this discussion into two parts. One, let's first see what the limitations that the government faces. Let's confront the brutal facts. And then let's go to the solution part of the problem. Yes, Mr. Gupta, can you tell us what are the limitations that you face?
I think I have to be prepared for the defense. I think you have started with a statement which I don't completely agree with. However, I think what we have to keep in mind is that Bangalore is never intended to carry as many people as it is being carrying. In the last 10 years, Bangalore has added one Singapore to itself. From a population of 84 lakhs, we have become 135 lakhs, almost estimated. And this basically shows on the strain. If you go to Singapore, you cannot add beyond X number of people every year. You cannot add more than X number of vehicles every year. And this is all well known. If there is a new residential township that comes up, in that case it is designed beforehand with the transportation, with the water, with the wastewater links beforehand, before the people start moving in. Here, obviously, it doesn't happen that way. Long time back, I came into Bangalore in 91, about 31 years back. And then also, I recall in 94, I joined as a young, you mentioned about your cub reporter, in corporation. I joined in corporation in 94. And in a social gathering in the evening, people told me that, look here, why is it that Marthalli flyover is not made? Then the Marthalli did not have a flyover, it had a level crossing. Okay? And I said that, look here, when you bought that land or when you bought that apartment on the other side of the railway line, you knew fully well that there is going to be a railway line, railway crossing. But obviously, after purchasing it, you say that, look here, the city has failed you. So the issue is that the city dwellers are coming here because of the great opportunities the city provides and the dreams and aspirations that they would like to fill. I recall 85, the first time I came here as a IIT Kanpur student, as a part of the industrial tour and all that. And then also it was a city absolutely worth living. Even now also it's a city absolutely worth living. And that's the reason why people flock here every day. They complain, they whine, they definitely fret about it. And definitely things need to be improved further. But this is a city which is a city of the future, and rightly so, Deccan Herald, I think, has listed out 2040 how Bangalore should be.
Okay, let's move on to...
Now,
Oh, sorry.
if I can stop a little bit, now 2040, do we envisage more population to get added? I wouldn't like. I remember 2012, I was in Bangalore Water Supply Board as chairman, and I was talking to my engineers in a beautiful rain harvesting theme park, which is made in Jayanagar. And I said that, look here, how do we handle the water of Bangalore? And people got up and said, why do we want more people to come to Bangalore? But since then, Bangalore has again added 50 lakh more people. So the issue is that the area which were added 15 years back, we have not been able to provide water and wastewater connections. And I would like more to be done on the city. One, we require much revamped administrative structure on which the government has passed a new legislation which provides for zonal decentralization. And the second thing is, yes, you require a lot of more funds. And yes, there will be problems regarding pothole-ridden roads and all that. I'm sure there are culprits for that we can always find and we can always fix. But the basic issue is, if we are looking at only the present ones and trying to only do day-to-day cleaning and day-to-day kind of repair kind of job, we can't think of 2040. So I'll stop it here, and I'm sure we'll take up further.
Let's move on to Ms. Nirupa Shekhar. Would you like to add to the list of problems that we are facing? Since the commissioner is here, would you like to draw his attention to some of the problems so that we are ready to confront 2040?
See, the idea is not to focus only, of course there are problems.
No, we'll come to the solution in the second part.
So, obviously if there's a wish list, see, we are all born and brought up in Bangalore. I'm a Bangalore girl, and obviously we all love this city. There are many things on the wish list. Okay, first is, if you ask anybody, I can narrate the top 5 problems, right? Everybody wants better roads and better infrastructure. People want their garden city to come back. People want safety for women, because I think while you have a huge influx of number of people, you want the city to be safe. For me, that is the biggest challenge I see as a woman in this city. All the rest, for me, okay, you go over a pothole, you can manage it. You have to smell garbage instead of garden, you can manage it. But safety for me, especially with 2 young girls, is for me a top priority. And obviously, when you look at urban planning, it's not just your roads and garbage and water, as somebody said earlier. It's also the well-being of the citizens, right? How do you make this a more livable city, more enjoyable city for the citizens? And that has to be in terms of recreation, whether it's making better parks. I think somebody had mentioned it earlier. I'm an athlete, so I love cycling. How do you make it? And everybody discourages me from cycling, especially post-COVID. Most people took up cycling. They say it's not safe on the roads. How do you make a cycle track, or even if it's far away from the city, how do you make recreation an option for people? Because eventually when you talk about urban planning, it's something much larger than just infrastructure. It's about the well-being of the city. So those are the top 4 or 5 things I can think of, that are applicable to every citizen of the city.
Now that you come from the realty sector, there is an allegation that you are the problem. When I say you, the realty sector, you're not just part of the problem. One is, I wouldn't like to blame every company, but it's very common that you don't follow the rules of the city. You don't follow the sanction plan. You've got an approval for 3 stories. You build 6 stories. Am I right, Mr. Gupta? Or do you want to be politically correct? You encroach upon lake beds.
Not the established people.
There are good, of course there are. See, we should always accept that Bangalore is what it is because of the realty sector also. But on the flip side, you have got people who violate the plans, who encroach upon lake beds. So don't you think we should also have some kind of a social responsibility instead of just blaming the government and the corporation?
No, I definitely don't believe in just blaming the government or the corporation at all. I think every private company and individual has a responsibility. I agree that the real estate industry does cause pollution. That is a fact. And whatever said and done, you cannot stop development. Development will happen irrespective of whatever you do, right? Development is going to happen. The question is, can development happen in a responsible manner? So I agree there are many probably smaller developers or unestablished developers that do flout the rules and that do give the industry a bad name. But there are also other developers, apart from us, I can name a couple. I know that, say, Mahindras are very keen to create a zero carbon footprint company, just as we are. It's not something we can do overnight, it's something that we can do maybe in 10 to 15 years. But when we do create large townships, the idea is to be zero carbon footprint or carbon neutral. So it's when we create our buildings, we try to make it platinum and eco-friendly. We try to get it IGBC rated. So there are responsible developers, there are irresponsible developers, just like there are bad apples in any industry. But I agree, it is an industry that does cause a lot of pollution. We have to work hand in hand with the corporation to see how we can develop in a responsible manner.
Yeah, now let's move on to Mr. Naresh Narasimhan. You've listened to the problems. So if you could just capture these problems in 2 or 3 words and then move on to the solutions. What are the problem?
Well, I'm an architect and I'm also, you could accuse the same thing, but that is like accusing traffic. There's a traffic problem in Bangalore. What people don't realize is you are traffic because you have 2 cars, one for you and your wife, and maybe another car to pick up your kids. You are the problem. So can we ban, shall we also say that all car manufacturers are bad? I doubt that. I doubt you can say that very much, right? But I'll just step back from what both are saying. I was surprised when you called this 2040, because I would have been more happy if you had called this summit the Vision 2037 for a particular reason. It's the 500th year of the establishment of Bangalore. It was founded in 1537, and people don't realize that Bangalore as a city is older than Chennai, Bombay, and Calcutta. Only Delhi and Jaipur are older than Bangalore. And of course, Varanasi, nobody knows how old it is. It's older than legend and probably twice as much put together or something. But Bangalore's imagination was not from a village overgrown into a town. It was always set up as a town, and which then merged into the surrounding countryside, and it became what we see today, right? But what has happened over time is that successive planning principles which have been used to, and Bangalore has a very long planning history, though it doesn't look like that to you. Because the first city improvement committee was set up in 1952 after independence. And we've had a series of outline development plans. Every 10 years we have had a planning process, etc. The current planning process is delayed a little bit, but it's not that it does not have a plan. See, the issue is really the quality of planning tools that we are still using in India is all based on fossil fuel era thinking there's an unlimited fossil fuel available, and it's all based on ideas developed by the West in the 70s and 80s. We don't have an Indian genius yet to think how to think of our city. We all the time apply some Western template, and in a Western template, like some C.K. Prahalad once said, what is needed in India are not best practices. What you need are next practices. You can't take an idea which has worked in New York or Singapore and say we have to do it like this. It may be a better idea in my opinion, and I'll switch to the solution mode now. I think everybody's bored of problems, right? So, we have a fairly strong, people don't realize sometimes the word design, the first 4 letters are Desi. DESI is, so we have to come up with a Desi way of doing design in India, and it is our own genius that has to come to the fore. And the genius is that we believe, as particularly in our ethos, in our mythos actually, that the world is composed of 5 elements, right? The Pancha Tattvas. It's air, water, space, energy, etc. Right? And why is it that a plan is made in India with vague visions? Just like you pointed out, we will be like Singapore, we will be the cleanest, greenest ever city, carbon neutral. All these are nice jargons to use. But if I ask you a direct question, right? In 2037, I'm going to change your summit name to 500 years of Bangalore. Okay, 2037. What is the air quality you want in Bangalore? That's a metric. PM 2.5, what it should be. The PM 2.5 level of New York City today, I just checked, is 2. The allowed level internationally is 10. The Indian standard is 40. And Bangalore today is 196. And Delhi is 600. The maximum you can score is 500. For Delhi, they revised it a little more. No, the worst, Delhi 500 means unlivable. But somehow life still goes on at 600 also. God alone knows how. Now that AAP has won Punjab, hopefully stubble will stop burning there, but we'll see, that's another discussion. Right? Let's see. But what is the, I'm coming back to the Panchatattvas, right? What is the energy need of Bangalore? It's X megawatt or X gigawatt. How are we going to secure that? What is the water need of Bangalore? Many speakers before me have pointed that out. The Kaveri 5th stage is the last water we'll get from Kaveri. That's 22.5 TMC feet. That's all. And from groundwater sources, you can produce another 3 TMC feet. For a population of 2.5 crore, you need 51 TMC feet. Where is that water going to come from? God alone knows. There is rainwater. There is a Mattondu Kaveri falling on our city every year. 16 TMC feet of rain falls on Bangalore every year. And all of it mixes with sewage and goes into Tamil Nadu. Right? That's what is happening. And there is, water, according to me, is not a problem. Mobility is probably a Panchatattva we have to add. The one thing Bangalore can be proud of is very good broadband. In India, everything works beautifully. When you have internet, you can buy tickets, you can buy food, you can do anything you want. But the real issue is mobility. Master plans of yesteryear are based on 2 principles. One is land use, which said this is residential, this is commercial. We use words like downtown and suburbs, but you see in reality that's not the truth, right? There are people living on Level Road, which is downtown. There are people having offices in Koramangala, which is supposed to be suburbia. So we have a mixed use culture in India, and we have to stop this land use based master planning completely. It's over. That era was okay when you had a vehicular transport to go. That is not going to work anymore. Second, the paradigm that should replace it is what is called transit-oriented development, which is based on availability of easy transit. The moment we can make transit easier, there's no reason why Bangalore has to develop anymore. People come into this city for a job. They're not coming here for the traffic, definitely. They may be coming, maybe influenced by the climate. But they don't really care whether they live in Koramangala or in Whitefield, as long as it's close to their workplace. It's time to maybe call an end to Bangalore's rampant growth as it is now. Cap the population at, say, about 1.5 crore. Take the 8 towns like the Chief Minister and the others were saying this morning. Put urban amenities of high quality. Make 8 Bangalore sisters, like a ring of pearls around Bangalore.
Yeah,
Put
we'll
mobility,
come to that in a minute.
right?
Yeah. See, one of the problems that Bangalore faces is total lack of coordination between different civic agencies. You would have seen a road which is not laid for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But the moment BWSSB lays that road, you've got BESCOM and, BBMP lays the road, you've got BESCOM and other agencies digging it up. Perhaps what we lack is in the morning you had, rather in the post-lunch session, you had elected representatives making certain charges against BBMP, which we will allow the commissioner to respond to it now. But is there a need to have some kind of an umbrella organization, a city government or a governor, a mayor in council or whatever, to which all of the civic agencies report to? So that, there is some kind of a control over all of the civic agencies. Today, all of you seem to be working in silos. There's not only lack of coordination, but it appears that the agencies are working at cross purposes. So how can this be solved?
Yeah, so yes, I would say that we have created number of parastatals. I'll take you back to the Bombay Presidency. The Bombay Presidency towns of Mumbai and Ahmedabad, all utilities and the local body were fused into one. So you had the Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation, in which there was a wing looking after electricity, another wing looking after transport, another that is the best, if you see, recall the acronym, And then you had the water, which was integrated part of the same civic functions. Here what we have done is we have created different parastatals. As soon as you create a different parastatal, you come to perhaps become oblivious to the requirements of other civic agencies. And that doesn't happen at our level, at the higher level. It happens at the lower level. At the lower level, at the ward level, and our wards are pretty big. So at the lower level, at a say 50,000 to 1 lakh population is the population of each ward. We should have all these agencies which are working for the utilities, all working them in harmony and unison. If they were part of a single body, it makes it easier. Otherwise, the coordination committee at the highest level, etc., is not going to sort out these issues. And that's the reason why, in fact, some of the people advocate that at least the water functions, because BWSSB and BBMP are seen to be always squabbling. So they should be integrated into one single corporation, so that there is no issue of, you can always have the master water works and some of the sewage treatment plants, the end disposal, etc. That could be separate, perhaps. But at the end, at the ground level, they should all be integrated into one. Now, that is one. The second thing is, perhaps we don't realize the magnitude of what the city is. We are close to almost double the size of London or New York. And the problems in those cities also are there. If you see, for example, if you go to New York, you will not find New York to be a very clean city or something like that, the way, say, Switzerland would be. But it's a functioning city. So what we need to do is to highlight what is getting done. There's definitely a lot to be done more. But I would say Bangalore is the first and the major city in India which is taking up a lot of water recycling. More than 300 million liters a day is being taken up for recycling. Some of it is finding way into industrial use, some of that into residential use, etc. We are perhaps one of the major cities in India which is taking up the source segregation, the waste segregation at source. And almost 50% of the waste in Bangalore is getting segregated, and the dry waste goes into the recycling, and the wet waste is going into the composting. And this is being carried out. We are working with a number of citizen volunteers to see how a very effective citizen participation programs comes into place. We are also working with several other people. Naresh, for example, is leading one of the initiatives to renew the waterways of Bangalore. And that will basically turn the city drains into a city waterway or a park or open area. Now, these are all we are working with, and I'm sure that there are very well-meaning organizations with which we are working. Wonderful tasks is being done by a number of organizations, and I would request Deccan Herald to take it into a next series forward, in which we can look into how there can be partnerships between the people, the corporate world, and the government or civic agencies to work together.
Yeah, we just have about 5 more minutes to go. Yeah, 10 minutes, okay, good. So we'll...
Coming in from the audience as well.
Okay. Before that, let me go to Mr. Narasimhan. Now, we've, I think, elaborately discussed the problems and the solutions. Now, if you could just close your eyes, and if you had a magic wand, what kind of Bangalore would you like to see in 2040? Forget all the problems and limitations. You just give wings to your mind.
I think that's a question for the next generation to answer. I think the issue right now is really all we want to see is the garden city back again, right? That is the big dream of this whole. I grew up in the city. I've been living here for a very long time. And really speaking, the one big thing that we all feel the loss of is that whole ambience of what it used to be. If you can, how do you bring that back? Is it an utopian dream too? I think it's an utopian dream. But at the same time, unless we have a very strong planning culture in this country, that we don't have static plans, but we have a clear vision that Bangalore should be like this. And it's not an elitist vision, it has to be an inclusive vision, including everybody of this city, and then make it into tactical 3-year, 4-year goals, which get reviewed, and the plans don't get stuck in a static state for 10 years before we look at it. I think the planning cycle has to become much shorter. If we can pull that off, and we can also control the growth of the city as it is, and develop the satellite towns around Bangalore, and also the rest of Karnataka, push urban development into the other cities of Karnataka, which Bangalore is still generating 70–80% of this state's economy now. It really needs to decentralize. And if we can do that, I think this will be a livable city well into the 21st century, 22nd century, if you want to call it that. But to pull that off requires not just the government, not just the politicians, but it requires the people of the city to take pride in the city. If you ask half the people in any gathering, how old is Bangalore? Roughly people think it started the same time as Infosys, somewhere in 1990. Right? And people don't realize it's a 485-year-old city. You know? I mean, the vision is not there. And I always tell my friends that people who drink Kaveri water, the old Bangaloreans, they love the city, they live here. People who don't drink Kaveri water don't care. People in Whitefield don't get Kaveri water. There's a secret ingredient in Kaveri water which makes you fall in love in Bangalore. And I think that we have to find the root of that pride and that culture, that cosmopolitanism, also the love of the local language and local identity, and only then we will be an equitable city.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, because you were asking for solution orientedness, and I wanted to just bring about like a couple of very actionable things that could happen. One is from a real estate perspective, one is from tech perspective, right? If I start from the real estate perspective, kind of following what Naresh had to say, again, central to urban planning is the live, work, play concept. And we all talk about congestion. And if, like how we have allocated spaces for industrial parks, first of all, industrial parks should have some residential in them so people can live there and work there. And if we focus on mixed-use developments, which is what all, like even real estate developers want, create 40-acre, 100-acre, 500-acre type townships where developers, private industry is willing to set up the hospital, set up the school, set up the mall, set up the residential, set up the social infrastructure, whether it's mall or hotel. Private companies are willing to do that, and we have multiple successful concepts where that has happened. That's a way to reduce congestion. It's a controllable environment, which are like mini cities within a city, and a lot of the water issues can be resolved, the garbage issues can be resolved. So creating mixed-use developments and mini townships, like he mentioned, satellite towns, is one way. The second way is like when you talk about technology, right? You mentioned potholes, a pothole-free Bangalore. There is a company called Pothole Raja that uses plastic waste.
Sorry, let me interrupt you because there's a question that's
Sorry.
directed at you. I don't know who sent this question, the name is not here. It's in line with what you're talking. What's your vision for a green smart city? What's Brigade doing to move towards such a vision?
Okay, perfect. I can just continue with what I was saying. So we've set up an accelerator 5 years back to focus on technology in the real estate space. And the amazing part is 30% of these startups are focused on sustainable living. So for instance, one is this Pothole Raja, which actually uses plastic waste to fill up your potholes. There is a company called Structure. It uses the agri-waste to create an alternate to gypsum board panels. So your construction can actually be done from agriculture waste, so you don't have to do your burning of crops. There are companies that do water management. Anytime there's a leakage in any pipe within a large complex of 4,000 apartments, it will tell you so that water doesn't have to be leaking. There are companies that do sewage treatment plants. So without electricity, without management, they use some microbes and bacteria to do it. So without electricity and stink or stench, you can have a sewage treatment plant. So there's a myriad of technology that we can use. There's also now people are providing clean air as a service. So when you walk into an office, it will tell you your PM level. So indoor, sometimes the air quality indoors is worse than what it is outdoors. So it'll actually, they have filters that will make your indoor air quality much better. So if we can just tap into technology, like you said, DESI, it's all Indian-made startups that have technology for this city and this country. So we just need to tap into the technology that already exists.
Okay, there's another real big issue that we have to confront. There's a question connected to that. Though the questioner has not mentioned the word corruption. The question is about quality control. You know, most of our assets do not even live their own lifespan. If you look at the temples of the past, you look at the temples of the Chalukyas, Pallavas, they've all withstood the vagaries of time for 1,500 years. But today we have a flyover on Tumkur Road, which is not even 15 years, and you can't, it can't take the load of heavy vehicles. If our assets don't live for 20, 30 years, how can we be prepared for 2040, Mr. Commissioner?
I would not know the details of what happened in Tumkur Road flyover. It was taken up by the National Highway Authority of India. Normally speaking, they do a wonderful job. I would say, for example, the connectivity to international airport in Bangalore is so comfortable because of the extensive work done by the National Highway Authority of India about, if I am right, about 14 years back, 2008 when the airport opened. But what happened in Tumkur, I won't be able to say. Again, a wonderful job in terms of electronic city connectivity, which has been taken up. These are all forward-thinking projects which were taken up. I would like to say, I know you have 2 minutes and that's ticking on our screens, but I would like to say one more thing. I think what we also want in Bangalore, I'm digressing a little bit from your question, is for citizens to become part of the civic processes. People to know where does the water come from or where does the waste go and all that. Now these are issues which are very deeply ingrained in any of the citizens of major cities in the world. I recall myself driving down in Singapore to a water desalination plant. And the driver told me on the way that look here, our city has 4 national taps. One of them is rainwater, another one of them is water from Malaysia, another one of them is water recycling, and then the 4th one is desalination of water, seawater. Now this is a random taxi driver talking about it. How many of our learned workers, educated, well-educated people know about where does the water come from? Does it come from 100 kilometers away? It comes from 1,000 feet down and it goes where? Where does the waste come from? Where does it go? Now these civic issues and how do you connect to our resident welfare associations? We have been working extensively with the apartment associations, with the resident welfare associations on a number of issues. COVID issues, for example, we were able to work on them for vaccination, for screening, testing, number of issues. But what I would desire is a lot of migrants perhaps require assistance on this. And I would implore that if there are startups here, if there are, I'm sure that our startups are assisting people worldwide, they should also be able to assist people to know about their city, about their immediate surroundings. We have tried to revamp our website to make people know their ward and their ward officers so that they feel connected. You should also know who basically takes off the garbage from in front of your road, which is the auto tipper, which is the Paur Karmika working, because these are all responsibilities clearly assigned. But I think if we have, say for example, I was in University of Berkeley for a brief period, and we used to greet our driver, a bus driver, every day morning. Good morning, Tom, how are you? How are you doing? Now, this kind of greeting culture, if it is there for the civic workers, I'm sure it will work a great deal for people to understand what it is.
I want to add one line to what your question is, just a very short line. This word corruption, right? It's a common thing that comes up in forums like this. I want to distinguish between 2 kinds of corruption. One is extortion, like somebody giving you a protection racket, saying, I'll beat you up if you don't give me money. Or, for instance, if all of us have gone on a train, and we want to, somebody is bugging you for unless you give money, you can't get a berth or something like that. That is extortion. The thing which is killing the city is not extortion, it is collusion. And that the private citizen has as much a part to play in it as the person who is taking it. And collusion between Bangalore, Mr. Gupta will agree with me that 80% of the buildings built in the last 15 years have violated the law. Who is doing that? The government is not building those buildings. The established builders and the established architects, we will allow 6 inches more setback to avoid any problems. That's what we do. We don't want to have any issues with the government. But many individual citizens, there is a guy, I just now came from Langford Road, right? The guy has built 9 floors. And who's doing it? It's collusion. And collusion is the heart of the corruption crisis in India. And unless the private people stop, there has to be a giver and there has to be a taker. You stop giving and don't break the law. And then you will notice that the system will change.
Yes, we've completely run out of time. And what I think emerges out of this discussion is that public participation is extremely important. To wrap up this discussion, I'd like to recall an anecdote which happened many years ago. There was a discussion like this called by the FKCCI, the Federation of Karnataka Chambers of Commerce and Industry. It was with the BWSSB. So after an hour-long of discussion, the BWSSB chairman, who was then an IAS officer, he said, okay, let me narrate a story. He was fed up with all the questions. So he said there was a man walking through a forest and he was chased by a tiger. So he started running and he fell into a well which is very deep. So in the process, he caught hold of a branch. So he looked around and then he saw a beehive on top. He said, okay, this is not a danger. Then right then, on the branch he was holding on to, there was a snake. At that precise moment, a drop of honey falls on his lips. So he savors the honey and says, in the midst of all this adversity, a drop of honey fell on my lips, so thank you, God. So the BWSSB chairman says, you should all be like that man. Despite all his difficulties, he savored this drop of honey. He loved it and he thanked God. So somebody from the audience gets up and says, sir, before you promise us that honey, that drop of honey, please give us a drop of water. So that way, we can all live on dreams and hopes. And I'm sure Mr. Commissioner and everybody else is doing the best to make Bangalore better. And let's hope Bangalore becomes much more livable by 2040. Thank you.
A round of applause for this panel. I request all the panelists to stay back as Mr. B.S. Arun joins us to felicitate and of course acknowledge this lovely discussion, urban planning for better Bengaluru, ease of living. Thank you so very much, Dr. Gautam Machaya as well, for driving this conversation and for bringing out plenty of key points as well. Ms. Nirupa Shankar. We do have Mr. Gaurav Gupta as well, the Chief Commissioner of BBMP. Mr. Naresh Narasimhan as well. Along with Dr. Gautam Machaya, who is a regular contributor to Deccan Herald. Thank you so very much for being part of this discussion. A round of applause for them, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.